Hello, welcome to day one of Excavating Texts. The first question for today is how can we speak sharply without effort? I'll expand that a bit. So when we use language naturally, as in when we use it as we are trained to do so, by default it doesn't inherently have any sharpness. It's up to the individual practitioner, the one is using the language, to know how to use the language sharply. So we're trying to think of ways. How can we, the ways of speaking sharply without effort? So how do we think of a language which by the means of its syntax, by the means of its rules of application, the rules in which it can be employed, would be sharp to begin with, without needing individual training and effort.
Okay, so when you say sharpness, I'm taking it as a meaning as being able to convey what one wants to convey.
Yeah. So
Okay.
moving away from, let's say, the noise. Now the noise could be seen as in a very simple way, noise could be seen as something which prevents the meaning from emerging, so just interference. But
Yeah.
it could also be seen as the artifact of effort from the individual that we are unable to parse. So a particular individual might be actually only trying out different ways of communicating, but not all those ways are clear to me, are not to the listener, that is, right?
Right.
So,
right.
so as a listener, I'm not able to parse each of those ways.
Okay.
So it becomes noise in that sense, right?
Sure,
So,
sure. Sure, but then maybe the two have to be separated because one is the listener and the other is the speaker.
yeah.
The speaker might actually be sharp, but depending on the listener, it may not convey information.
Yeah, exactly. So because I mean, in our current use of all these words, sharpness and language, it becomes a very individually variable set of notions.
Right. And what I'm also feeling is the sharpness gets defined by the environment because the listener is the environment.
Right. So
And
the way lawyers talk, for example, is a specific kind of, in the sense, it's even like a code.
right.
So they can figure if another lawyer is sharp or not, but they might not be able to figure if a poet is sharp or not.
Right. That's right. And they
So
have also, they have, they have shaped their speech or their communication based on what inputs they are getting from around them also. was what I was saying, in the sense of environment. Like, if you are in the courtroom, that's how you speak. That's how you're
Right.
expected to speak.
Right. So those are the, I mean, actually, these, I would say, dialects of language defined by the communities of use,
Right.
like law. Now
Hmm.
those become almost, they become simple to parse, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, like we're saying, people can read each other's symbols and keys and flags, and they know who is sharp and who is not. So, because the use of language in such a community indicates
Right.
ability to think or imagination and all of those things. So
Right.
the question is, I mean, I'm basically uh, thinking and inviting us to think that if in excavating text, right? So
Hmm.
text is, as opposed to imagery, is supposed to be, this whole. It doesn't. It's not supposed to be immediate.
Okay.
And it's so unlike, let's say, if you just have a very offhand comparison, with other media. So maybe with the way music or uh, speech
Hmm.
or pictures are thought to affect people in a very immediate way.
Okay.
Text is actually suppose just understood to be trapped in its own syntax.
Sure, sure. I mean, there's a certain passivity to it. I mean, there's a certain extra amount of processing that goes on. You have a piece of text in front of you, unless you've read it, it may not affect you by just looking at it.
Yeah, and the scope of literature is so vast that
Hmm.
uh, each individual is supposed is in the sense can have their own personal set of,
Engagement.
yeah, authors whom they can say are really brilliant practitioners or whatever, right? So it's
Yeah, I
like
mean,
their
and
own reading.
but that might be the same with any medium.
Yeah, but yeah, of course. But I
Yeah.
mean, just the analogy doesn't hold, of course, but just as a immediate, I mean,
Sure,
just as
sure.
a offhand kind of thing. But so yeah, so then can we think of ways of making of of using language of
Hmm.
essentially in text? We are speaking essentially of text in ways that can transcend this kind of
Yeah,
stasis, right?
yeah.
This inability to overcome itself.
Right, right. And sort of the immediate sort of thought that comes is to make it as sharp as possible. To distill the text into sound bites of some kind.
Yeah, and there we go into the whole, no notion of sharpness is universal because uh,
Yeah.
as individuals
Hmm.
learn to use language sharply, they also learn to read sharply in that sense. So it's a matter of education performed through experience.
Right.
So it's not something that happens spontaneously in a flash.
That is true. That's true. Unless in the course of education, sharp texts are presented as the baseline where the students are starting. So that's the example where you're starting with of what is
Right.
a right. You remove the redundancy right from the beginning. But then maybe that marination doesn't occur, and therefore it's a learned way. It's not a realized way of sharpness.
Yeah,
So,
because then, like, if you think back about our own process of, getting educated,
mhm.
if someone were to do that to us, uh, it would have seemed just pedantic or just some, just something which you would not have enjoyed
Hmm.
as an imposition at the very minimum.
Right, 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 right. There isn't enough
Uh,
choice to make your own decision about what is sharp, or at least to realize what sharpness is.
yeah, so I mean, and so this made me this problem makes me think, and is it's making me think like numerous people have done with uh, with other media. So in the case of films, at least that I'm aware of, or code actually
Hmm.
programming. So it's possible. Is it possible to kind of develop a set of agreed upon codes or agreed upon attributes
Hmm.
in associating sharpness with language. So in the sense, it will be possible to switch from speaking casually or speaking as we speak, and
Right.
then also speak in this very codified, concentrated way, which would immediately
Yeah.
kind of make our meaning apparent.
Yeah. I mean, if we take, for me, when I hear the word sharp text, for me that is like an aphorism. So, if you have, like, sometimes you have these stories, old jungle saying, or there is this old Chinese saying, where a piece of just one sentence is spoken, and the listener realizes the meaning based on just that one sentence. If you listen to the sentence itself, it doesn't sound sharp from a normal perspective, but it has a deeper meaning. It's a very dense, it's got, it's very deep. So,
Right. So, but then so I mean that's a actually a useful specific example because it helps us go into the problem further. Like because this problem is of quoting
uh-huh.
of making these citing material from here and there,
Yeah,
and leading us to this uh, uh, kind of days of bland profoundness, right, in the environment. So if you will see hundreds of uh, kind of graphics with one-liners which are
right,
supposed to be inspirational on Facebook or
right.
anywhere else, and
Hmm.
but that they're without context of any kind, which is what they're supposed to be, because they're supposed to just work as a line.
Yeah, yeah.
But they operate within this agreed upon idea of what it is to be profound.
I see what you're saying. Actually, this is a problem that I have with some of the so-called minimalist posters or whatever. I mean, you are actually presenting the punchline and saying
Yeah,
that this is it, this is something very deep. But the whole processing doesn't happen with the reader. The reader is already reading the answer.
right. So I mean, like last night after being after reading the trigger that you sent my way, I was actually trying to arrive at what it means,
Hmm.
what a surface actually means, right?
Okay.
And because I mean, also we have, I have of course, thought about that before, but
Hmm.
to think about it again,
Right.
because after a point, when
Yeah.
you equate a word with a with something that you want to say, then the
Yeah.
word becomes almost like jargon, which you can end up repeating as many times as you want, and you can
Yeah.
forget what it linked to.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
so I remembered that the surface for me was alluding to an experience.
Okay. Okay.
So
Okay.
the
Okay.
encounter with an experience, right?
Okay. Okay. The envelope of that experience.
Yeah, so when you encounter the experience, when you first become aware of the experience,
Okay.
so that would be the surface.
I see. Okay. Okay. Okay.
So,
Interesting. Because I was looking at it in a slightly different way, which is quite the obvious surface, just the surface. But the surface is constructed in that particular way because it has something underneath it. The reason the surface is like that is because there's something underneath it. So there are certain, um, there is a like a construction that brings about the surface.
right. But the whole point of excavating text in that sense would be
Uh-huh.
to focus and to, in a sense, remain committed to and obsess about, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
just the encounter with the surface and not actually go into what lies
What's
beneath.
underneath? Okay, 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 okay.
Because,
And that's very interesting because what that tells me is just to look at the surface and sorry, the insight that I just had was to engage with the surface. Actually, if you're interested in what lies beneath, then you can divine that from the surface.
yeah, and also, if the interest in what lies beneath becomes a distraction in actually trivializing the surface,
Yeah,
you
because
know,
you're not looking at the surface anymore. You are,
yeah, and the depth is actually infinite. So that's something
yeah,
which we started going into when in the first in the study group, the perspective
right,
studies thing. But
right.
so there is never going to be any point of actually
Yeah, I
arriving
hear
at
you.
anything once
Yeah, I
you
hear you.
go within.
Yeah.
So the surface, just so in the sense, just to draw some parallels, what we call our how we often, let's say, understand
Mm-hmm.
if some person is going to be, if it's going to be possible for us to be friends with them or not.
Right.
So we often take a call like that based on their presence.
Yeah, which I have a lot of trouble with that method actually. But go on.
No, so I mean that presence, in spite of all of the other metadata of
Right.
where you're from, what do you
Right.
do, how much you earn, whatever. It's the presence that you can actually rely on the most.
That's what's giving you the data points to make any
Yeah, the
conclusions for
most
yourself.
because it's unconscious. I mean, you can't
Yeah,
really
yeah,
mold
yeah.
your presence.
No, yeah, and that's true. And there is statistics or studies that say that people make their impressions right in the first half second or something. So,
Yeah. So that would be the surface of
right,
uh,
right, right,
you know.
absolutely. Yep,
So
I see.
the in excavating text, we are actually going towards something like uh, that in terms of text, where wherein instead of relying on individual skill and
Hmm.
experience of using language in a specific way which communicates something to someone else, which becomes a community of exclusion basically, right? So
Right,
after a point you can't talk to people who are unlike you
right, right, right.
because you have just you have trained yourself to speak so specifically that no one else can understand you.
Correct, correct.
So
I'm trying to get the excavating text part though. I mean,
yeah, I mean, in the
excavation.
sense, so what you're trying to excavate is
Mhm.
uh, the possibility of encoding, of codifying the
Okay,
uh, attribute, the aspect, whatever, the sharpness inherent, the possibility in language, the inherent possibility in language to be sharp.
Okay.
If we want to codify that, just so that it becomes a set of replicable rituals and rules which
Mhm.
are not so much based on skill, experience, insight, and all of that,
Hmm.
but just it's just becomes just a question of adherence to the set of rules.
Okay. And you're saying that this is a general enough set of rules that doesn't, because any set of rules again sounds like a box, right?
Yeah, I mean, it will be a box, but in our current frame of operation,
Hmm.
these rules are not even possible to articulate. Like, I mean, where would you start if you
Correct.
want to say that I want to codify the language that musicians use, for example? Where would you start from?
So, I mean, there are ways of thinking in that direction. I mean, it depends on the genre of music again, which makes it a box again. And there
Yeah,
are some rules that go with that. But there is, at least in my subjective opinion, there is a feeling that there is something which transcends genre, which makes a piece of music to me as a good piece of music, which is meaningful.
yeah,
And
which is after you listen to it, right?
yeah,
But I'm saying we just if you just stay with talking about it or writing
okay,
about it, not listen. It's not possible for us to listen to it at all
okay,
if you just stick to how we are going to talk about it or write about it.
all right,
So, then I mean, especially, I mean, I know of this difficulty in the context of art that the moment we are trying to describe the experience
hmm,
which can't be had,
right,
we fumble around, we
definitely,
actually struggle in trying to. And
yeah.
in scholarship, of course, we hide that struggle by using jargon.
Right, and we have very explicit language and it's all laid out, and there is a very explicit way of engaging by the reader. Like you are supposed to read it critically in a particular way.
Yeah. So, but these are all communities of professional practice in a way,
Right, right, right.
scholarship. And
It's not universal like that.
yeah, we cannot actually, I mean, even someone who is a expert practitioner of any of these professions might
Right,
not be able to sit down and codify. I mean, actually
yeah.
cast this into a set of rules that, okay, if you do this,
Mm.
then you are going to be able to speak this way, right?
Okay, but here's the thing. What is the goal? Like, is the goal to come up with a way to convey that? Is it a goal to come up with a way for anyone to be able to read?
Yeah,
And
so I mean that actually the second question for us clarifies this more. It's so the second question is it possible to make the individual rules of using specific language common?
common, right?
So this, I mean, the goal that you're,
Mhm.
so I mean, I would just say the goal would be to be able to hold a conversation with anyone, right?
Makes sense. Makes sense.
So if I, before I am able to become friends with someone, if we are just a random, like
Yeah.
it's a random, uh, meeting, you just
Hmm.
meet someone randomly, and but if they're familiar with the rules,
Yeah.
then it's possible to actually communicate and
I mean, there are
yeah.
certain rules which do exist at a human level, probably, right?
Yeah,
I
I mean,
mean,
I think this act of codifying will just be that. So code is
right.
not about actually creating the set of rules.
Okay, okay, okay.
The rules exist amongst us. We actually,
Yeah.
that's how we manage to communicate at all.
Anyway,
I mean,
yeah.
yeah. But it would mean maybe compiling these down
Right.
and
Makes sense.
running them through a filter, which ones are truly universal and which ones are not
Yeah.
in that sense.
Yeah. Um, so is it possible to make individual rules of using specific language common? I mean, generally there is something like finding common ground, for example.
Yeah.
So I'm meeting with the surface, and how do I engage with it? Though I have already probably engaged in the first half second and finished my entire processing, but if I want to be more explicit than that, and I'm not aware of it, I'm not able to articulate it yet, but I'm trying to engage with this other surface.
Right. I mean, that is the, okay, so that is the specific point of, that would be the value of
Okay.
such a common set of rules.
Yeah.
So the value would be that, your experience would
Mm-hmm.
become communicable to me and my experience would become communicable to you.
Makes sense.
Instead of, let's say, my experience filtered through, some format, let's say,
Yeah,
of
some like
literature,
even
something,
right, or even social
yeah,
filters.
social behavior. So those are all filters which make it very easy for us to
Yeah,
actually hide and delude and masquerade and all of
and
that.
misjudge.
Yeah. So, which is yeah, fine, but I think so. This is the way, let's say, a lot of virtual communities also exist. They through a set of very codified
Hmm.
set of rules of, like in IRC chat, or
Mm-hmm.
in some other.
Yeah,
The
boards.
way IRC chat would be used by a specific community,
Yeah,
which is trying to collaborate on something without knowing all the collaborators very well,
correct.
they would rely on such a code of conduct in that sense, in using language.
Yeah, and but again, there are jargon that goes with it. I mean, if you take a 4chan or some board like that, there is a certain lingo that goes with it.
Yeah, that I think in such open communities, but this lingo is often a mimicry or it's actually something that is learned by the users
That is
for
true.
for participating.
Right.
They have a common purpose, so and they want to, join the gang in that sense.
Correct. The hive mind.
Yeah. So how do we? I think it's not so much of a yes or no question that
Hmm.
is possible, but it's actually uh, about zooming into, let's say, our own specific uses
Mm-hmm.
of how we use, language which we consider sharp for ourselves and for our use,
Yeah.
and thinking about how we can look into those and open them up and make them common.
I see. I mean, yeah, I see that. Like, so if I want to be able to communicate with one set and another set and be able to communicate at different levels or whatever.
Yeah. So if for example, um, if so,
I mean, the first thing I can think of, as I said, was common ground. The other thing is, sorry for jumping in, but the other thing was learning the other person's jargon.
right, and that will become easier if they're already speaking or using common jargon.
Or if they are not, for example, because if we want to build something that's a meta set of communication, because there will exist different sets. So there are lawyers and there are poets. How do I talk to lawyers and how do I talk to poets also?
Right.
So then if I need to have some kind of a meta set of rules. that enable. And if I'm a lawyer and I speak lawyer speak, how do I speak with a poet?
Right. So the common ground in this sense would be the what you would imagine to be, let's say, the of common interest to
Right, right,
uh,
right,
as
right.
uh, as wide a set of people as possible, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So I suppose we can talk about the weather.
Right. Because when you end up using such a set of rules before
Hmm.
you meet them in the
Yeah.
classroom, for example,
Hmm.
then it usually becomes about teaching others what you do,
True.
right?
Like,
and
yeah,
and that is so I mean, so when I got thinking about this, I got thinking about it also from
yeah.
that perspective, and that doesn't feel very uh, right in the sense,
I,
or useful.
but then it comes back to what you said right in the beginning about, we talked about directly teaching the rules themselves.
Yeah.
But then again, it's like, I mean, the analogy that I can think of is exposing a listener who wants to learn to listen to music, exposing them to good music right off of the bat, rather than exposing them to a whole bunch of junk plus good stuff.
Right. No, so I mean, I'm thinking in this direction that wouldn't these set of rules be
Uh-huh.
shouldn't these set of rules be about a set of mechanisms that help you figure out your own notion of sharpness,
Okay, that makes
right?
sense. That
So
does, yeah.
yeah. So then in the classroom, then what you're doing is not
Giving them
teaching
the
what
rules.
you
Yeah,
do,
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're
or
actually giving aids for discovery then.
yeah. So you are giving facilitative rules,
Right, right.
uh, which because of the way the rules are shaped, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
or whatever,
yeah.
because of that, they will retain a sense of being universal, but at the same time, they would actually lead the individual towards something specific
Yes.
of their own.
Agreed, agreed. That makes sense, yeah. So in that sense, I don't see why that would be wrong because the journey is individual. It's not like the teacher is prescribing the journey itself.
Right. I mean, and also it will mean that the teacher is actually able to understand
Hmm.
what the student does,
Yeah,
because you might end up triggering someone's imagination in such a tangential way
right,
that you don't know
right.
what this guy's doing anymore.
I understand. Yeah, I see that. I see that. And yet you have a slight handle on it as the teacher because you gave a particular trigger and this is what came out of it from that student. So there is a new way of approaching that same trigger, and yet it is within a framework of sorts.
Yeah, so the set of rules become like tools for translation back and forth without
Yeah.
without requiring the student to remain
Hmm.
within the scope of what the teacher is familiar to.
Yes, yes, very much, because each of the things is going to be individual anyway, because teacher is different from the student.
Yeah, so they could actually, retain a very, I mean, the ability to actually explore as far and wide as they want, and still uh, the teacher would still have a way of translating whatever they come up with.
Correct.
So
Right.
yeah, I mean, uh, actually coming up with this set of rules
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
would be very useful. I mean, very useful for me, definitely, in terms of what I do.
Makes sense.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, as in, I essentially work with people, but I, we can also hope that it's useful for, something which you can open out and have other people use it and
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
all of that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, similar to in the sense, I think it will remain consistent with the ideas expressed in the charter that I
Mm-hmm.
shared with you a few weeks back,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of, wanting to retain the ability to talk to as many people as possible.
Makes sense. Makes sense. The beauty of this is the commonality. I mean, journey is different, but it's still a journey. Path, the details of the path are different, but it's still a path. There is that commonality always.
Yeah, and I mean, what has troubled me about education for a long time is no matter how brilliant you might be,
Mm-hmm.
there is always a kind of military
Yeah.
notion of education which involves training.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that takes us towards our third question, which is, is education only about training, or is it also about inspiration,
Makes sense.
right?
Yeah. Makes sense. I mean, yeah, exactly. That's right.
So
And
are we only ever able to coerce people into
mm,
following a set of a knowledge pathway that we are showing them,
mm-hmm.
or do we have the set of tools to be able to set them
Yeah.
to scatter their path and let them find the and still be able to understand it, because that
Absolutely.
becomes a fundamental stumbling block that which most teachers are insecure about, that
Yeah.
if you actually let students
Do
imagine,
whatever. Yeah.
yeah, then how do you make sense of it uh, as learning outcomes?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the to me, the whole thing goes back to the way the world is structured in terms of the end. Everything has to be productized and everything has to be commoditized. You have to go down you have to get this kind of training because of the whole, uh, making a living, that sort of thing. The way I mean, I speak from a place of privilege, obviously, but the way the world is organized is such that unfortunately you have to fall into certain paths. If you're
Right.
not in that path, and if you don't have your own agency and don't have your own imagination and initiative, then you're kind of not in a good place if you don't have a training of a skill or something. That's how it's
Hmm.
viewed. And your worth, your unfortunately value and worth is associated with the degrees or whatever it is. Like, if I have a doctor in front of my name, that has a certain worth, unfortunately. So
Yeah. I mean, because even if you slept through your entire 4 years of college or whatever, you
yeah.
would be familiar at least with the framework. I mean, you at least have the curriculum. You're aware of what
Yeah.
it was that you were supposed to learn. Whether you learned it or not is a
Not
different
correct.
question.
Correct. And even if you had no awareness of the curriculum, just because you have this piece of paper, you are able to get into this particular line of profession, whatever, and you are able to sustain yourself, which is what is needed in this world at this point. So,
Yeah. So, I mean, thinking beyond that, because I mean, I don't really know what. in what way, or I mean, in the sense of actually, the way things stand in the world, I don't really know how it is that, we can offer something which is
Hmm.
workable, which is
Yeah,
scalable, workable. So, I mean,
yeah,
that has
yeah,
that has confounded me for pretty much, a long time. But
yeah. No, I hear you. And I feel like there is a lot of, I feel like a lot of people live like zombies. And my personal opinion is that a lot of innovation and technological progress, etc., happens in certain directions because people have not spent the time to figure out what really is needed. Like I remember reading some sentence somewhere that all these brilliant minds in the world right now are working towards making people click on ads.
hmm,
So what I'm saying is, of course, I cannot judge that clicking on ads is a bad thing or watching reality TV is a bad thing, and we should be spending time trying to figure out sustainable fuels. I don't know if we can judge one is better than the other, but if we were to say that there is a agreement that there is more need to find ways to solve, people getting clean drinking water versus people getting better cell phones, if we say that one is better than the other, then I feel like there is a meaning towards people spending time not just learning trades but also taking the time to figure out what is meaning for them and what is meaningful for a bigger picture. And that, I believe, comes through inspiration and realization, not just by reading.
yeah, I mean, and that inspiration will also come from that ability of the framework of education that you are a part of, to
Yeah.
that its ability to actually acknowledge your inspiration as
Hmm.
something which is furthering your learning pathway, like just your
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's
yeah,
something which you can be which can be acknowledged as something that you are learning, and you can be
yeah.
accredited for it or whatever.
Understand. It's like, for example, people who are in the engineering courses, etc., and they are made to take English or humanities, they don't necessarily, they feel like they're wasting their time. Whereas actually, I don't know if you're seeing what I'm saying, but
Yeah, I
uh,
mean, which is why I mean, most engineers are not actually able to communicate even to themselves.
correct,
Why is it that what they do is valuable?
correct, correct.
So, I mean, they're not able to even think about it, and so we don't even know, for example,
Yeah,
outside of, yes, let's say, doing military innovation, we don't really
yeah.
know where do these things are, I mean, where is this skill set actually important? So, I mean, quickly linking this with what we were talking about last time, you
Mm-hmm.
know, in when we were talking about infection.
Mm-hmm.
So, if we think of inspiration through a rule set that we follow in how we use language, if we
Mm-hmm.
see that as a kind of infection, that
Mm-hmm.
that that we are that we are actually spreading to further not just our own needs but also
Yeah.
uh, as a kind of defensive and offensive I mean, we were talking about how the uh, manipulation and exploitation towards that we are find ourselves being subject to
Right.
actually is because of our own desire, our own hunger in that sense, and how we can
Yeah.
actually outmode that by preempting
Mm-hmm.
it in some way. So if we connect these two things,
Yeah.
then it might be possible to think of a kind of education that offers, that promises a kind of value, but which is also serving our own agenda of just making it possible for us to communicate with others, right? So I don't know if
Agreed very much.
yeah.
I mean, I totally see that, because partly to me what it is sounding like is when communication is also about empathy, and this kind of an inspirational based, realization based education to me means that you are practicing ways of seeing, you're practicing ways of relating.
Yeah, and I mean, this can happen, this practicing these ways of relating to each other actually could happen once we have set, something out of the way. For example, we should try and design formats of education that can work without any form of capital exchange.
Absolutely.
So and think about how people, I mean, and really not think about how people who are teaching or doing anything else are going to pay for it, how their time is going to get paid for it. Because, I mean, if you, I mean, because teaching is in that sense a role which has to be played if you can, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you have the ability to teach. So it's being able to teach is as much of a privilege as being able to learn.
Right. Otherwise, it's just a function. Somebody is just
So if both of these roles are thought to operate without any other way of attaching value to them,
right,
then it might even be possible, because once we pay somebody, we don't actually consider it even possible for them to inspire us.
Yep. I mean, that's an unfortunate offshoot. Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah. I mean, maybe we can overcome that, but I see what you're saying. The payment is, at least to me, it's an obstacle. And to come up with these formats, that's a very interesting thing to think about, to come up with formats for this sort of exchange. Is it an exchange?
It's like I don't know. It's more of a hint. It's a kind of
it's a fire setting fire.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something which I'm very sure of, but which is just have maybe a vague sense of how it would make sense. In the so if you think of a fire setting another fire alight, then you have to be a light yourself to set something else on fire.
Yeah.
So once you are on fire, then principally you don't need anything else.
Correct.
So I mean, I think of it this way, that most people who actually know what they're doing are not able to sell it very well.
Most people who know what they are doing are not able to sell it very well. Is that what you said?
Yeah, because it's so inherently pleasurable.
Right. Right.
The act of doing what you know, what it means to do, that it pays for itself, and that demotivates the role of advocating it, of you evangelizing it, and
Very
So
much.
that's a short circuit in the system.
Yes, very much. Very
You know
much.
that,
Yeah, makes
yeah, you
sense.
just, and that is something we could work around,
Mm-hmm.
in designing this format.
Mm-hmm.
So because yeah, these people who can teach
Mm-hmm.
might not want anything more than being able to teach.
Right, right. Exactly. Exactly right. Exactly. And everything else is really a distraction.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
it's,
so it would be because I mean, it's not everything else is not really something that you have motivation for, because
exactly. Yeah.
it's not really
Yes.
solving any part of the puzzle for you. It's not
No,
that
it's
it's
not.
going to, yeah, so
It's just
it only becomes,
logistics. Yeah.
yeah, and that becomes only as interesting as it is to, just not to let things get too rough. But then
Yeah.
beyond that, it's
Hmm.
not really so much of an adventure.
I agree. I mean, the analogy I can see is like, artistic entrepreneurs. Like it used to be that you would be an artist, but now you have this thing where the artist is also an entrepreneur and they have to have all these other skills. And so I don't feel like doing it anymore. I can't do all these other selling things. So why should I even feel like if now my producing the art is contingent upon my selling it, then why would I even feel like doing it? That's the other side.
Yeah, so I mean, so what we got talking about in the with the second question,
Hmm.
uh, essentially thinking of this community, this whole community of practice or whatever that operates around these set of rules of
Yeah,
using language.
yeah.
If we think of this as essentially a kind of
Kind of.
club, a
I'm
kind
sorry.
of
Could
a kind of club,
okay. 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 Okay.
a kind
Okay.
of club that
Hmm.
is a kind of club
Hmm.
to whom we are through a specific through a channel of content
Hmm.
we are uh, you know creating that world for them.
Makes sense. There's an environment.
Yeah, so and access to this environment
Hmm.
would, I mean, yeah, it's a kind of model which I don't know if I even have it fully in my head, but
Sure. 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 But
uh,
it's
yeah, I mean, I'm just saying that if you think of a set of these people who do what they do well, but
hmm.
and so what we are just talking about, I mean,
Yeah.
people who actually get, out, who get pleasure
Hmm.
from their act of producing
Right.
in a way that they don't really have motivation to do anything else with it.
Correct.
So if you think of this as something that is essentially inspiring.
Right. So it's an ecosystem which enables those who produce to just produce.
Yeah, and also engage in teaching, but not
Yeah.
teaching what they do,
Correct.
but uh, teaching this facilitative set of rules through which
Yeah.
others can also do.
Agreed. 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 I see that.
So it could actually become a way to spread this further.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I see that. I see that. I do see that, and I do see that it's needed. I mean, I can't articulate exactly, but I understand that it's needed.
So there's a small addition to the this study group that I was thinking of making every day. And like I discussed with you earlier, that next month, what in June, what we'll do will essentially be the first. I mean, it will be completing a year of doing these things,
Right.
these study groups as in Surfacial. So we discussed earlier how we would try to do these 3 concurrent study groups, right?
Right.
So if you so what study group would you like to anchor? So so we can develop that idea and talk about it. So and we can develop that together. So essentially, it's you have a set of ownership of that.
Understand.
So it's something which you might enjoy much more.
Understand. Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So do you have like offhand, would you think of some raw ideas? Yeah.
Very raw. There was one thing which I was thinking about is self-expression. So I feel like, I mean, it's a pretty long subject, but to boil it down very short, very small, self-expression, like to have the space to explore. So I've been through my own journey so far, and I feel like I have a few things that I saw which nobody taught me that. I figured it out, and I feel like that's something I could share, because I'm going through certain struggles which I also see other people going through them, and I feel like I saw this and I learned this. Maybe I can share this with you.
Yeah.
And that was sort of like one of the things was being able to articulate and expressing oneself through exploration. But first of all, exploring, going through the process of exploring. And I feel like because of how the way our education systems, etc., are set up, unless we have a family environment that allows us to explore, we don't have a chance to do it. And I feel like having that family environment is also very rare. So I am lucky enough to have that, and I went through. So I feel like exploration and self-expression, sort of, very roughly.
So something which we could think around, let's say, by using the word by prospective articulation or something like that. So you're in that sense prospecting for the means of articulating, but while you do that, you articulate.
Makes sense. So learning through doing.
Yeah, essentially, but yeah. So I think that could also be a way for us to start working on this set of rules. So
I see.
You are free to design the way you want, how you want to navigate this 1 hour, how you want that to be navigated. But you can if you want to at all have these set of questions which help you structure the discussion or something else, then I mean, you are free, you can design your own thing. But in those questions, you could think of these rules also. If you want to use these rules, which you can want to introduce through each question in a way. And and that's also this I mean, just to complete the stream of thought. And so also this would be something you can think of this as something that Surfacial will be hosting. But what I'm saying is you should think of inviting a set of people, like up to 10-12 people whom you will enjoy talking to.
Makes sense.
Right?
That makes sense. Yeah. The only thing that I think might be worth going through is, and which is probably what you're doing in these 3 days, is looking at those set of rules. At least to have a general sort of idea of where those set of rules or what they are.
Yeah, I mean, I think in these 3 days, what I would go towards is only trying to understand what kind of rules these rules should be,
Correct. Exactly.
and in a month or two, those
Hmm.
in those we would actually start developing these set
Yeah.
of rules,
Makes
because
sense.
yeah, it would need that kind of parallel processing, of uh,
Yes. Yes.
uh,
Yes. Yeah.
things possibly developing. Uh, so it will be the same 1 hour where I will be
Hmm.
anchoring something, you'll be anchoring something, and someone else will be anchoring. So Malvika is not very sure if she
Okay.
wants to anchor a 3-day study group. So I'm
All
still
right.
trying to figure with her if she can. She's saying she can do a 1-day study group, but not 3 days. So we're
Okay.
trying to figure, if not her, then maybe I mean, I'm also trying to speak to Celeste and see if she would like to do it, but she doesn't have good internet, so
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
becoming an
Yeah.
issue. But so yeah, we're trying to figure out the third one.
Okay. I mean, if it is, it could just be 1 day, or 3 days where three separate people are doing, or there could be different ways of doing
So
it.
yeah, there could be 9 people.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if we have that kind of community yet.
I hear you. Yeah. Yeah. No, I know. I
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
So it's
I'm
not.
just trying to think.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That, yeah,
Mm.
that would make it easier for us to involve people who don't want to commit to too much.
That's
But
true, because developing that kind of material, I mean, it could be open also. Like you do a 1 day, and if really some stuff comes out and you want to discuss more, you could have a second day and a third day. That's another way of looking at it.
yeah, I mean, but the way I think about it is, if you have to think about 3 days, then you
Hmm.
will make up.
Yeah.
Then you'll be forced to think of, okay, what next.
Yeah. 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 That's true.
It just sets the format in which then you have to, yes,
That's true. Yeah.
yeah. So slightly trying to uh, draw, pencil that in, because it just
Yeah.
becomes a more. I mean, I think 3 days is a kind of minimum that I can think of, because it becomes a substantial way of developing an
Yeah.
idea. Which
It,
otherwise just becomes
I
a
hear you. Yeah. I see
conversation.
that. Yeah. That
Yeah.
makes. Yeah. 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 I mean that. Yeah. To get something out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, because 1 day, something that you just talk about for 1 hour is something that you can't even remember later sometimes, what did I talk
Yeah.
about? So if it's
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
3 hours, it becomes a substantial memory that,
Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
yes, I did that then. So that
Mm-hmm.
that lives on, at least in the minds of people who participate or think about it. Uh, so we'll stop the broadcast for today, and
Okay.
uh, start again tomorrow at the same time at 6 p.m. In time, and
Uh,
we'll develop this further. Yeah. Thank you for
that sounds good.
participating. Thanks.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. I'll talk to you. Bye.